Hi, welcome to the It Hurts to Mom podcast. Today I'm with Ashlee Hoelck, a certified coach, an upcoming podcast host, and a domestic violence survivor. So, Ashlee, tell us about your pain and how it relates to your trauma that you survived.
Yes. So I had chronic debilitating back pain, and it started when I was 21 years old. So it's a pretty young age to get really bad back pain. I threw my back out twice in 1 month. And, I went to doctors over the years trying to figure out what was going on, and I never really got any answers. Just the questions I would get were, okay, did you pick up something heavy? Did you get in a car accident? All of these physical things. And the answer was always no. I don't know what's going on. And so I threw my back out about 8 times in the first 5 years. And the pain was really, really bad. It wasn't just like, oh, I have a little bit of a backache. It was more like it felt like the muscles were being ripped off of my spine. And when I woke up in the morning, my husband, we met 8 years ago, and he knew in the morning to leave me alone. He knew that I needed to get my coffee. I needed to do some sort of stretching and movement to kind of ease the pain before I could be spoken to, because the pain was the worst when I would wake up. And this went on for 12 years. And in 2020, I kind of, once the pandemic hit and everyone went on this deep dive into personal development, I had more space. I was a mom of two at that point. So working at night at a restaurant. And so all of a sudden I had the space to take care of myself. And I started, with a morning gratitude practice and writing 10 affirmations / goals that I was working towards. And one thing that I wrote every morning was, I'm back pain free since 2020. And so a few months later, I heard about emotional trauma being stored as physical pain. And I was like, what is this? What is this concept? I've never heard of this. And so I kind of Googled a little bit more, and I saw a little bit more information. And honestly, I thought it was crazy. I said, there's no way that, and obviously I have been through trauma. I was in an abusive relationship in my teens. And then I kind of realized, wait, my abusive relationship ended when I was like 20, 21-ish. And that's when my pain started. And at that point, I said, maybe this is the reason. Maybe this is the answer to my back pain. And that was when I first connected it.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've heard, have you read The Body Keeps the Score?
Yes, I read it
Yeah.
after I healed my pain. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's like a user manual to myself.
Exactly. Yeah. So The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. It explains how we have two parts of our brain: the emotional part of our brain that is basically our emotions and our survival, which includes eating, sleeping, noticing pain, danger, things like that; and the rational part of our brain, which is for higher order thinking, like language, creativity, rational decisions. When danger arises, a part of our brain called the thalamus will send signals in two different directions. It's really quick. One to the amygdala, which is basically our
Alarm system.
Alarm system, right? It is in charge of our fight or flight response. And then our prefrontal cortex, which separates alarms from things that are not so dangerous. So the amygdala receives it first. And if it senses danger, it immediately tells the hypothalamus, which is located in our brainstem, which is part of that emotional brain, to release stress hormones. The amygdala is what decides if incoming info is a threat to our survival, even before we're even consciously aware of the danger. Then if you're not too upset, not too overwhelmed, the prefrontal cortex will step in and let you know, okay, that's not a real serious danger. So our amygdala is actually pretty good at deciding what's a real threat, unless there's been trauma. And this is what's so fascinating. So trauma dulls the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So the brain has a harder time deciding which threats are real. So the limbic system, which is part of that emotional brain, will release stress hormones, which puts us into fight or flight mode, even when there's not a real threat. So I just think that's so interesting. And depending on what source you are reading, between 50 and 80% of our physical pain is from emotional pain. And that's not to say that our physical pain isn't real, because as you and I know, it's very real and can be very severe depending on, how much trauma we've got stored in our bodies. And that's what, a lot of us do. Instead of, that's what I did. Instead of getting help for my different forms of trauma, I just tried to, live my life. And I thought that it wasn't gonna affect, my life now, because that's in the past, right? But, domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, all these things, they don't just go away, even if they're not still occurring. So, so what else did you decide to do about it? I know that you came to understand that there's a connection between trauma and pain. So where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I think the awareness and then the openness, okay, maybe this is the reason, those were the first steps. And then I ended up going into this manifestation program. It was like an online course, do it at your own pace, thinking that it was going to be very fun and light and like, oh, I'm just going to learn to manifest great things, And it ended up being this deep healing container. There was a lot of these really long meditations. At that point, I hadn't really meditated much besides like a couple of minutes here and there. And these were like 20 to 30-minute meditations where I was laying on the couch with my eyes closed. I was getting like full body sensations and tinglings and crying a lot. This whole process, it was a lot of crying, a lot of releasing. I learned a new perspective of forgiveness. And, during this process, I realized that I still had a lot of anger. Yes, I'm a very happy, bubbly person. And, I'm pretty positive, but I still had a lot of anger and hate towards my abuser. A lot of, why did you do this to me? And I hope that you're having a terrible life because you're a terrible person, all of these negative emotions. And I realized that they were only hurting me. So yes, so there was a lot of healing work. I did a new perspective of forgiveness. I also did something called a cord cutting meditation where, you close your eyes and you go in and you see the person and you literally cut the energetic bonds and the cords that are connected between you and this person. And everything that I was doing, I felt it so deeply, so intensely. And after about 5 weeks of this, I did it, when the kids went to bed, for a couple of hours. And after 5 weeks, I woke up and my pain was gone.
Wow. Yeah, I was wondering if this was some kind of retreat that you'd gone on, if you had to take some time out of your life, but you were just doing this in your spare time.
Yes. I am a homeschooling mom. So at the time, my sons were 6 and 2.5. So obviously we're very busy. I always am with them during the day. And so I don't have a lot of space. And my husband was actually working nights at the time for like 3.5 weeks. So he wasn't even there. And so I finally had this alone space to do this. So I finally had the space to be alone and to fully release and go through all of these emotions. And I think for a very long time, I had on a mask, I guess. And I just felt that I had to be a certain person. I had to be a mom and a strong person and not really give in to these strong emotions. Because, when I first got out of the abusive relationship, I did have very bad PTSD and depression, and I was self-harming, and it was a very, very dark place. And so I think I tried to keep myself away from that for so long, and it wasn't doing me any good, right? And I always compare trauma to a weed. You might not notice, but it's growing underneath the surface and it is choking out all of the grass. Like, I actually saw it happen into our lawn. I didn't realize that there was weeds growing and it killed like half of our grass because you didn't know. And I wasn't taking care of the weeds and I wasn't taking care of my trauma. I thought I was as healed as I could get. I thought, this is just how I am. I am just a little bit damaged goods, right? We always say that, oh, I'm damaged goods.
Sure, sure.
And we're like kind of not proud of it, but we're just like, oh, I'm just damaged goods. Yeah, just I'm a little bit broken. And so I didn't work on the trauma for a very long time because I didn't think that I could.
Yeah, and I can feel that too, because I mean I struggle with major depressive disorder and I mean debilitating anxiety sometimes, and there are times where I'm not sure if I can actually handle going that deeply into those kinds of really tough things. Right now, I'm in trauma therapy though, because something happened a couple years ago that just triggered my trauma, and we're working through it, and it's hard. It's really hard, but the thought that one day in the not too distant future I might actually have some healing from this, it makes it a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the things that I did too, it wasn't a lot of, journaling about the trauma. It wasn't a lot of thinking about the trauma. It was all of these other modalities that were just kind of near the trauma, right? So it's not like
Mhm.
going to talk therapy and like, let's talk about it, let's talk it through, because reading The Body Keeps the Score, you learn that even just talking about the trauma, even thinking about it, triggers that alarm system to go off and
Mhm.
sends that all those stress hormones through your body. And it's called rumination. It's a term I learned. So
Mhm.
it's called rumination when you're constantly thinking of your trauma and it's causing you to have that full body reaction. And we know stress is bad. So it's like my body was in a constant state of stress and I struggled with
Mhm.
anxiety for a very long time as well. And I was able to heal that, to actually heal that mostly before I healed my back pain. And yeah, it's just so important to, look at all the different modalities that are available because it's not like a one size fits all. There's so many different things that you can reach for.
Yeah, and the Body Keeps the Score talks about some of those modalities, and what it really points out is that after trauma, our mind body connection is severed. So, what we really need to do is reestablish that mind body connection. And there are, different studies that have been done and that show that even consistent journaling about a traumatic event, um, even not necessarily talking about the details, but talking about how it was making you feel and how it has affected you, um, has helped people's stress levels and showed a stress reduction in the body over time. And I think it's interesting what the author says. He says communicating fully is the opposite of being traumatized, and that's not necessarily saying you have to go to talk therapy. The trauma therapy I'm doing is not talk therapy. It's EMDR, eye
Mm,
movement desensitization reprocessing, and it's
yeah.
incredibly intense. I cry a lot during, I cry after, I have nightmares, but it has definitely improved the trigger for my trauma a couple of years ago to where I was a 10 out of 10. I can't even talk about it without having a complete meltdown to I'm a 2 where yeah, it bothers me, but I can talk about it without being crazy.
Yeah.
And also I think what's interesting is after the events on 9/11 in New York City, St. Vincent's Hospital asked 225 people who escaped the Twin Towers and dealt with that trauma what they found most helpful in coping with their trauma. And their answers were not going to talk therapy. Their
Mhm.
answers were acupuncture, massage, yoga, and the EMDR, the eye movement desensitization and
Yeah.
reprocessing, and also mindfulness, breathing, meditation, exercise, those different modalities that get the mind and the body connection restored are what are really can can heal us.
Yeah. And on that note, I want to share how there was a period of time where my back pain did go away. And it was when I started going to yoga when my son was like a year old and I was tired of telling him, oh, I can't do this. Mommy's back hurts. And I said, I got to do something about this. Maybe he was 2. And I started going to yoga because I heard, yoga is good for bad backs, right? And I was still thinking about the physical aspect of it. And so after about 3 months of going like 3 to 4 times, they had a daycare, so it was perfect. My back pain went away. And this was the first time what was I, like 28, in like 8 years that I was pain-free. I was able to jump off the ground again, because I'm not able to jump off the ground when my back hurts, because there's always that if you step wrong, it might go out. You might throw your back out and be done for a few days. And so the pain went away. It was magical. It was great. I got pregnant with our second son. And about halfway through the pregnancy, my son decided that he didn't like the daycare anymore. Like he would not stay in. And so I literally could not go to yoga. And I was working at a restaurant, like 5-6 nights a week. So there was no more space for me to go to yoga. And so about 4 months after I stopped going, the pain came back. But this time when it came back, it was almost worse, because I had just had 15 months without pain for the first time in 8 years. And then it came back, and it, like, the mental aspect of it, like, oh my God, it's back. This is what I'm dealing with again. And I just got really depressed and anxious about it, just thinking, am I going to be in a wheelchair in 10 years? Like, this is really, really awful. And after a few months, I was like, okay, I gotta go back to yoga. And I told my husband, I was like, I'm gonna have to go like on Saturday and Sunday mornings. That's the only time I can go. And so I went for a few weeks, and this was February of 2020. So I'm pretty sure we all know what happened next. The whole world shut down. And looking back at it, it's almost like the universe was telling me, it's not the yoga, Ashlee. Stop trying to make the yoga happen. It is not the yoga. And I think that the yoga helped. Now I think that the yoga helped not because of the physical stretchiness of it. I think it was because for the first time in a really long time, I was taking time for myself, and I was getting reconnected to my body and that movement. And I feel like that was the aspect that helped heal my pain, was that it wasn't just the stretching. So I believe it.
Absolutely. So what do you think the first step is if somebody wants to heal from their trauma and they're having chronic pain?
I think, like how I did, I think awareness that it's even possible. I think that is a huge step. And that is one of my missions, is to spread awareness that this is even possible. Because if you don't think it's possible, it's going to be really hard to go through with it, right? So I think awareness, and I also think education too, because that has helped me a lot. Like I did heal the pain before I kind of did the education piece, but learning about it and getting the science, because before I was like, it felt like magic. It honestly just felt like magic. And when I would tell people what happened, I'm like, I meditated and I like used an imaginary sword and cut imaginary energetic bonds, like it seemed so crazy and wild and magic to me. And so learning about the science of how it's actually changed my brain, it's rewired my brain, and that gives me the power that I can change my brain back, because if it could get changed one way, it can go the other way too. And so I think education on what happened is really important. That's also really great for any feelings of shame that you might have, or guilt that you have for whatever role you played in it, or whatever you feel afterwards. It's really great to kind of release that shame and to love yourself despite what's gone on. And then I think just starting to try the tools and the modalities that are available. I always suggest EFT, emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping, to people, because it's very simple. It could be done in just a few minutes a day. And, you don't have to talk about the trauma. You can treat the symptoms of the trauma. You can treat the anxiety or the stress or the sadness that you feel around your trauma. And another really easy thing is breathing. I know it sounds so simple and, automatic. We breathe all the time, but if you can slow down your breathing, you can slow down the rest of your body, which is really, really important when you're trying to manage your triggers. if you can just focus on taking a deep breath, 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, and do that for about a minute or two, then you can stop your body from having a full blown trigger. And yeah, so those would be my things: awareness, education, and then begin trying different healing modalities.
Awesome. So what are some mistakes people make after surviving trauma?
I think a lot of people want to not focus on it. They want to not heal. They think that time heals all wounds. I'm guilty of that too. We hear that growing up, oh, time heals all wounds. No, that's BS. It doesn't. It's not going to, if you don't do anything, nothing's going to change. It might seem to get better. Like in my case, I met an amazing man. We got married. We had 2 kids. We bought our house in Texas. But in October of 2020, when we had people visiting us, I was still laying on the ground because I was in so much pain. I couldn't stand or sit while we had guests in our home. So yeah, a lot of my life, it was going great. It was going well, but I still had this chronic pain. So time does not heal all wounds. You need to focus on it and you need to do something about it. And I think another mistake that people make is they're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to start healing. And then they want to go so hard at it and, do all the things for 5 hours a day. You're going to burn out just like anything else. It shouldn't be so painful when you're doing the healing. If it's getting to be too much, step back, give yourself some grace, give yourself some space, and just do it little tiny baby steps. I think that one's really important too. And then another mistake that people make is, I would say, trying 1 or 2 things and thinking, and it's not working, and then being like, oh, it didn't work. I guess I can't heal, right? Whatever worked for me, I could tell you exactly what I did. I can tell you the 10 things that I did, and you might do those 10 steps and you won't have the same results as me, because we are all different. We all have different trauma that we went through. We have different access to resources. We have different ways that we handle all of these things. So be willing to try something for, a couple of weeks, see how it's feeling, how it's working with you. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that nothing else will work, right? Just keep going and keep moving and trying new things.
Sure. Even medications don't work the same for every person and every body.
Mm-hmm.
And one other that I saw on your social media that I thought was just really poignant, one other mistake that people make after surviving trauma, thinking that we're unlovable. And
yes.
I certainly have questioned plenty of times, if I, was ever going to get a wonderful man. And I do. I've been married for over 15 years, and my husband loves me like I don't even know that I deserve to be loved. And so I just think that's so beautiful, because, we don't have to have these things that have happened to us define us. We can be a much more, complex person than just a trauma survivor, right?
Yeah. We're not defined by our trauma, right? It's a piece of the story. It's something that happens, and you don't have to let it define you. And yeah, that's kind of what happens in an abusive relationship, is you get told the story that you're unlovable or that it's your fault. And, oh, if you only didn't make me so angry, if you weren't so obnoxious, if you just listened, right? And so you get this story that, oh, it's just because I do things wrong. And so I think it's just really important to know that you are worthy. You were always worthy. You were born worthy. Nothing ever took that away.
Right. What made you decide to dedicate your life to helping women heal from trauma and chronic pain?
Yes. So obviously, after it happened, I always wanted to help. I just wasn't ready at the time. And then once I healed my pain, and after I realized that it wasn't coming back, I knew that I had to let other people know, besides just my friends whispering. And that's when I kind of started sharing my story on podcasts, because I know 1 in 4 women will be in a physically aggressive relationship, and that's only what's reported.
Right.
I did not report mine. I have a friend of mine who did not report hers. So the numbers are likely 1 in 2 or 1 in 3. And how many women are suffering from chronic migraines or fibromyalgia or chronic back pain, headaches, GI issues? I know I had such severe stomach pains and issues. I went to the emergency room 3 times because of my stomach, and I thought my appendix had burst or something. And they just kind of were like, maybe you have gas or something. Like, they just blew me off, right? They're like, oh, maybe it's IBS. And I know that's related to my trauma. And so there's so many women who are suffering from these things when they don't have to. And I suffered 12 years. So if I could get just one woman to look at their chronic pain and do something about it and think that it's related to their trauma and start their healing journey and heal their pain, everything that I'm doing right now is going to be completely worth it. And so that is just my mission right now, is to spread awareness and to, I can't make people heal. I can't make them go through the motions, right? So I just want to inspire women to start their healing process and to know that healing is a lifelong journey and it is nothing to feel shame around. We don't feel shame that we drink water every day or that we move our bodies. And there should be no shame around continuing your healing journey for forever. It's just another healthy habit.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, do you view healing as a destination or as a lifelong process?
So before, I thought healed, it was a destination,
Right.
and I thought that I had arrived, back when I was 25 or something. Little did I know I was far from healed, and healed isn't a real place. Like,
Right.
maybe you can heal like a scraped knee, but you do not heal from the trauma. It's a continual journey, and that's okay. If you stopped working out, you're going to lose your muscles. And so it's kind of the same thing, especially when it's such a deep trauma that completely rewired your brain. Like I know mine did. I still have memory issues, and I know it's related to my trauma. And I feel like the emotional and mental abuse is a harder process to grow and get over and move on from. And so, yes, it is a journey, and try not to focus on where you aren't at yet, right? Enjoy the journey as much as you can and look back at how far that you've come.
Okay. Well, if you want, one woman, that woman is going to be me, because I completely believe everything that you've said and that I read in The Body Keeps the Score. And I have, lots of mom guilt and wife guilt and, friend guilt that I can't play with my daughter enough and I can't be there for all the family functions. And, I can't stay up, at night and watch movies with my husband. And I do believe that it's possible. And I do believe it's also a lifelong process. I agree that I'm not just going to one day wake up and go, oh, wow, I'm suddenly healed. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love your story. Do you have any other advice for people who who are like me and have chronic pain and a history of trauma and abuse?
Yes. Right when you were speaking, I remembered another thing that I was doing in this process. I started talking nicely to my back instead of saying, because all day long I'd always be saying in my head, oh, my back hurts. Oh, my back hurts really bad. I started saying, my back feels great. My back is strong, like little affirmations, but for my back, and trying to just change what my brain thought. And so that was something that I think was super helpful too. And also, like you said, you have shame and you have guilt. Learning to forgive yourself through it. It's the shame and the guilt, like I said, those are negative emotions, right? And so those negative emotions are going to affect you. And so going through a process of forgiveness with yourself too is something that is super helpful. I don't know if you've heard of the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer, the Ho'oponopono. Yes, it's called Ho'oponopono, I believe. And you
Okay.
can Google Hawaiian forgiveness prayer and it'll come up. And it's, I'm sorry, thank you, I love you, please forgive me. And you just kind of, you can either say it or you can write it. I wrote it down and you just move through each of those phrases. And it's really cathartic and releasing. And I absolutely loved it. And that was a big piece for me.
Yeah, and on forgiveness, there's a book called Forgiving What You Can't Forget
Mhm.
by an author named Lisa Terkhurst, Lysaterkhurst. And I went through that book last year. And yes, I was working on forgiving some other people, but I did also look at it through a lens of forgiving myself. And one of the main pathways to forgiving a person, including yourself, is compassion
Mhm.
towards yourself. So
Yeah.
it's really important. So if people would like to connect with you, where can we find you online and on social media?
Yes. So I'm most active on Instagram. It's my name at Ashlee with two E's _ Hoelck, Hoelck. That is where I've got my website with all of my links. My podcast is launching on January 3rd, and that is going to be my project for, the next few months or so. But yeah, go check it out. The podcast is going to be Thriving After Abuse, inspiration, tools, and modalities for you to start or continue your healing journey and to fully thrive.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited that I got to speak with you today. I think this is just a really important and under discussed topic, trauma
Mhm.
and chronic pain. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of
You can
course.
find me at ithurtstomom.com and at ithurtstomom on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a blessed day, everybody.
Bye.